Adi Jasodanandana Brajajanadandana Jasodanandana Brajajanadandana Jamuna Tira Banachadi Jamuna Tira Banachadi Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabi Hari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabi Hari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabi Hari Jayo Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivajagacharya Asta Tarasatasi Srimad His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Ananta Koti Vaishnavarind Ki Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Gaura Premanandi. This is really fantastic. You two younger members of the family, you get to hear about Srimad Bhagavatam from when you're little. It's really great. I didn't. I was hearing other stuff. So this visit in the evening time is being dedicated to Srimad Bhagavatam and making a little capsule kind of summary of the different cantos. So the occasion, as far as I understand it, is there are many families here in the Naperville area that have been regularly reading Bhagavatam together in reading groups. And we're having a celebration because many of the groups completed first canto and second canto. And there's only 10 more cantos left. 12 total. So this is in honor of that. This is part of a festival, or just the warm-up of that festival, the prelude. And I think it's best if you take a look at the screen, because that's where the attention is going to go. It's a nice English word, pristine. Pristine means pure, pure. The pristine flow of Srimad Bhagavatam. So we're not going to make it through all 12 cantos, but this is from cantos 1 through 6 in each of the evenings, not all 6 tonight, but that's where we're going. And now let's see this nice picture of Srila Prabhupada, where he's speaking Srimad Bhagavatam, and we want to hear Srimad Bhagavatam from him. And he writes in the purport of Canto 2, Chapter 8, Srimad Bhagavatam is certainly a very dear scripture for all the devotees of the Lord, but it is auspicious even for non-devotees also, because it explains that even the non-devotees hovering under the spell of the material energy can be delivered from such clashes if they hear, notice bright color, if they hear the narration of Srimad Bhagavatam with devotion and attention from the right source, representing the Lord by disciplic succession. So there's a method for hearing Srimad Bhagavatam. It's, with devotion and attention and from the right source. That's the disciplic succession source. specifically. So we're going to hear some more about this. Here's a nice photograph of Srila Prabhupada's spiritual master, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. And he has the following things to say about Srimad Bhagavatam. Even if all the books of the whole world were to be burned, there would be no harm, provided one treatise was left, Srimad Bhagavatam. He likes Srimad Bhagavatam. Even if thousands of learned centers were to be abolished, there would be no feeling of inconvenience, provided the reading and teaching of Srimad Bhagavatam continued. So he's being really strong about Srimad Bhagavatam. And there are no other books in the world like Srimad Bhagavatam. This is not mere tittle-tattle or an exaggerated homage. If one reflects on it as a truly impartial judge, one will realize that there has not been, nor will there ever be, a book like the Bhagavatam. So you see the cantos, the covers of the cantos pictured on the right side. Now, there are many things, so many things to say about Srimad Bhagavatam, but this is from our disciplic succession, Prabhupada, and then his spiritual master, Bhaktisiddhanta, and his father is Bhaktivinoda Thakur, who also was a great acharya. And he writes something very interesting. From Pranava, or Om, came Gayatri. From Gayatri came the Vedas. From the Vedas came the Brahma Sutra, and from the Brahma Sutra came the Srimad Bhagavatam, which has brightly risen like a Sachit Ananda sun. Those who have eyes should see, those who have ears should hear, and those who have minds should meditate on the topics of Srimad Bhagavatam. Now that's an introduction to one of his 100 books, Krishna Samhita. Very interesting, fascinating book. Now we're going to continue in the disciplic succession. You see the image on the right, that's a painting of Sanatana Goswami. Sanatana Goswami is one of the 6 Goswamis of Vrindavan, the principal followers of Lord Chaitanya. And what's written about him and Srimad Bhagavatam is, when Sri Sanatana was a young man, a Brahmin appeared to him in a dream and blissfully gave him a Srimad Bhagavatam. When he woke up, he was perturbed. Then, later that morning, the same Brahmana came and gave him the Srimad Bhagavatam. Pretty prophetic dream, huh? When he obtained the Bhagavatam, Sanatana became ecstatic and merged into an ocean of prema. After this incident took place, Sanatana began reading Srimad Bhagavatam daily. Now, in those days, books were handwritten on palm leaves. They weren't like printed on a printing press. So it was really a rare treasure. A dream, and then it came, and then he read. Later, now on the right side, that's Lord Chaitanya giving his blessings to Sanatana in his mature stage. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu gave personal instructions to Sanatana about the essence of Srimad Bhagavatam. Based on those instructions, Sanatana compiled Digdarshini Tika, a commentary on Hari Bhakti Vilas, Vaishnava Toshini, and Brihat Bhagavatamrita. So Vaishnava Toshini is Sanatana Goswami's commentary on every verse of the Srimad Bhagavatam. Whew. Like Prabhupada did, Sanatana Goswami did. And Hari Bhakti Vilas is a very elaborate writing. It's really long, and it's describing it's like a how-to manual how to worship deities, how to observe festivals, how to chant mantras, how to do everything, everything that the Vaishnava does. How to approach a guru, how to perform yagyas, how to everything. So he compiled that for the Vaishnavas. And Brihat Bhagavatamrita is mentioned there. That's a very interesting, elaborate commentary on Srimad Bhagavatam in a very unique way. It's translated into commentary of his. That's this Dig Darshini Tika, commentary on Brihad Bhagavatamrita, which he wrote. It's a very fascinating explanation of the essence message of Srimad Bhagavatam. So, moving along, we're going to hear something about the Dwaraka queens hearing Srimad Bhagavatam. So you two younger devotees, you know Krishna lived in Dwaraka for a long time, right? And he married many queens, right? So after Krishna departed, there's detail, but the queens were protected by Arjuna. And Krishna told Arjuna before he departed from this world. Well, he didn't tell Arjuna. He told his servant, his chariot driver. His name was Daruka. Krishna had a chariot driver in Dwaraka, Daruka. So Daruka was sent back to Dwaraka to tell the residents of Dwaraka, leave Dwaraka. In 7 days, it's going to go into the ocean again. So tell Arjuna to escort the queens, because Krishna's departing. They're all going to be without husbands. Arjuna, should take the queens back to the great grandson of Krishna, whose name was Vajranabha, who was then the king in Vrindavan, or Mathura. So he went to Mathura, and the queens were in Mathura. And we'll read, after Krishna's disappearance from this world, his queens came to Braja, where Vajranabha, Krishna's grandson, was protecting them. Actually, it was Mathura. One day, while being tormented by the pain of separation from Krishna, they noticed that their co-wife Kalindi was really happy. And so they asked her, how come you're really happy? How is this possible? Aren't you feeling separation from Krishna? And then Kalindi explained why she's very calm. And how did she become very calm? She became calm because when Krishna was living in Mathura, because they're now also living in Mathura, Krishna sent his dear friend Uddhava. Uddhava? You know Uddhava? No? You know Arjuna, right? Arjuna is Krishna's cousin, right? Because Arjuna's mother is Kunti, and Kunti and Krishna's father were brother and sister. Well, Vasudeva, Krishna's father, also had a brother. And his brother's name was Deva Bhaga, and he had a son, his name was Uddhava. So Uddhava and Krishna were like really buddies. Like Arjuna, really close, very, very, very close. So when Krishna was in Mathura, he sent Uddhava to go give a message to the gopis. And when Uddhava, who even looked like Krishna and was carrying Krishna's message, the hearts of the gopis became somewhat pacified. So Kalindi said, the real remedy is we have to find Uddhava. Because if Uddhava can do again for us what Uddhava did for the gopis, then everything will be nice. So, they made a visit to Vrindavan to see if because they heard, listen, they heard that Uddhava had made a prayer that he would become a blade of grass in Vrindavan so that the gopis can place their feet on his head and get dust from their feet, from the gopis. So we just have to go to Vrindavan and find Uddhava. Somewhere there he's a blade of grass in Vrindavan. So they went with Maharaj Parikshit and Vajranabha, because Maharaj Parikshit was the king in Hastinapur, and Vajranabha was placed in charge of Mathura under King Parikshit. So they all went to Vrindavan looking for Uddhava. So if you're looking for Uddhava, what do? You have kirtan. They had a really loud, boisterous kirtan. And as the kirtan became tumultuous, suddenly Uddhava came out of a grove of bushes and creepers. He was a blade of grass. See? There's Uddhava coming out of the blade of grass. Finding all of them absorbed in Krishna kirtan, Uddhava offered his respects to them all, and he embraced Maharaj Parikshit. Then what happened? So this is described in Skanda Purana, but as you see, it's also found in Padma Purana. Very interesting. Right in Padma Purana. Then what happened? Uddhava speaks to Maharaj Parikshit. Oh, king, you are most fortunate. You are always in exclusive devotion to Krishna. Among all the inhabitants of Dwarka, these queens are without a doubt most fortunate. Under the influence of Yogamaya, they have forgotten themselves and are suffering from anxiety caused by separation from Krishna. Unless Krishna becomes visible to them, none of them will regain their proper consciousness. But Krishna has wound up his pastimes. That time has finished, and now we have entered a different age. However, listen, and I will tell you another way so they can see Krishna, right? He can be visible through the Srimad Bhagavatam. Do you want to see Krishna? But he's already departed? Srimad Bhagavatam. Now comes a really interesting series. There's many manifestations of Srimad Bhagavatam at different times. And we're familiar with one of them, but there's many, many. Here's one found in Skanda Purana where Lord Krishna speaks Srimad Bhagavatam to Lord Vishnu. Interesting, huh? And then Lord Vishnu speaks it to Goddess Lakshmi. Or there's another passage in the Skanda Purana where Lord Narayana speaks Srimad Bhagavatam to Lord Shiva. And in the Srimad Bhagavatam, we find, of course, Lord Narayana speaks Srimad Bhagavatam to Lord Brahma. There's the references. Especially celebrated is, you see, Canto 2, chapter 9, verses 33 through 36. Those are really special verses. It's said that those 4 verses is the essence or nutshell of the entire Srimad Bhagavatam. It's called the Chatur Shloki. Four verses. That's the upon which the other, the 18,000 verses of the Bhagavatam rest or summarized. Very important verses, and they're spoken by Lord Narayan to Brahma. So what does Brahma do? He speaks it to Narada Muni. What does Narada Muni do? He speaks it to Vyasadeva. What does Vyasadeva do? He compiles it, Srimad Bhagavatam, and under the order of Narada to do so. Very, very special literature. And then what does Vyasadeva do? Vyasadeva instructs it to Shukadeva Goswami. So So the Bhagavatam was passed on many times. Here's another, according to Skanda Purana, when Uddhava is with the queens in Dwarka, he explains Srimad Bhagavatam to them. Then there's another description. Srimad Bhagavatam was spoken by Parashara Muni to Maitreya Muni. And then Maitreya Muni spoke the Srimad Bhagavatam's message to Vidura. Now here's an interesting one. In local traditions in Bhubaneswar and Amarnath, there's a description of Lord Shiva speaking Bhagavatam to both Parvati and Shukadeva Goswami. Very interesting. We hear in Brihat Bhagavatamrita, we mentioned that already, Maharaj Parikshit speaks to his mother, Uttara. There's the image of bursting in flames as Maharaj Parikshit being bitten by the snake bird. And all the sages were expecting this was going to happen, and sure enough it happened. But before he departed, he spoke the Bhagavatam to Uttara. It's right in Brihad Bhagavatamrita, it's mentioned. And we heard earlier that the Bhagavatam was spoken by Parashara Muni, but it was before it was spoken by Shankyayana Muni to Parashara Muni and Brahaspati. That's found in the Bhagavatam and Skanda Purana. You get the picture. It's spoken many times. And Brahaspati spoke it to Uddhava. That's in Skanda Purana. Right in the Bhagavatam, we find that the Kamara Sampradaya, it's one of the 4 Sampradayas mentioned in the Bhagavatam, Kamara Sampradaya. They learned directly from Lord Sankarshan. It's stated in the Bhagavatam. And then after the Kamaras heard it, they spoke it again to this Sankyayana Muni, who then passed it on to Parashara and Brahaspati. So that's another line of the disciplic succession of the Srimad Bhagavatam being passed on. It's a very popular literature, as you can see. Shukadeva Goswami spoke it to Maharaj Parikshit, and Suta Goswami was in that audience. Suta then spoke it to the sages of Naimisharanya. So it's a very, very important literature. It's the ripened fruit of the tree of Vedic knowledge. That the whole of the Vedas is sometimes compared to a desired tree from which all desires can be fulfilled. One tree, all desires. But the ripened fruit of that tree is the Srimad Bhagavatam. And here's one painting that's showing a number of different situations where Srimad Bhagavatam is being spoken. That was an interesting section. But we're not done yet. We're back to this the flow of Srimad Bhagavatam, cantos 1 through 6. Now we're just going to focus on canto 1. So you're going to listen carefully. It's a summary. We're not going into the detail, but there's 19 chapters in canto 1, and they're grouped in the following way. Here's each of these petals of a lotus are describing what's in chapters 1 through 3. In chapters 1 through 3, you see over there on the left, there's a number 1. That's the sages of Naimisharanya had gathered for a 1,000-year sacrifice meant for the pleasure of Krishna and his devotees. Concerned for the future generations of the dangerous age of Kali, they asked 6 questions to Suta. And Suta answers them, all 6. That's the first 3 of 19 chapters of Canto 1. I bet you want a copy of this presentation so you can look at it later, because we're going quickly. It's a lot of information here. And then the next 4, 5, and 6, there's a series of events which result in the advent of Srimad Bhagavatam. Vyasadeva then compiles all the Vedic literature, but he still feels dissatisfied. And Narada appears, and he wants to find out from Narada, why am I feeling dissatisfied? So Narada explains why his dissatisfaction is there, and he also explains about his past life. Who was Narada Muni in his past life? It's in the Bhagavatam. Then, starting with chapter 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11, we hear the following. Vyasadeva, under Narada's instruction, Vyasadeva sat in meditation. He saw Krishna along with his energies, and he saw that the Bhagavatam is the cure for Maya. That's chapter 7. Then 8 is Kunti's prayers, 9 is Bhishma's passing. Then Krishna's departure from Hastinapur, and Krishna enters Dwaraka. Then the sages, headed by Shaunaka, they ask Sutta to narrate the events leading up to Maharaj Parikshit's appearance. So that's chapter 11. Not too many chapters left. 2 more groups. Chapters 12 through 15. Maharaj Parikshit takes birth. Vidura inspires Dhritarashtra to leave home and achieve spiritual awakening. And the Pandavas retire after enthroning Maharaj Parikshit. They hear of Krishna's departure. They want to go with Krishna. They turn the kingdom over to Maharaj Parikshit, and they depart. Chapter 15. Then, the final chapters, 4 chapters in the end of Canto 1, where beating a bull and a cow, Kali is checked by Maharaj Parikshit. But Kali influences the heart of a proud Brahmin boy, and the boy curses Maharaj Parikshit to die in 7 days because the king garlanded his father with a dead snake. Parikshit renounces everything, goes to the side of the Ganges, begins fasting, and Shukadeva Goswami appears. You see down the right corner, that's Shukadeva Goswami sitting, Maharaj Parikshit sitting, and Shukadeva Goswami arrives. And he asks him, what's the duty of a man about to die? So there you go. That's a summary of Canto 1. That was quick. It probably would take you a few months to read it. But that's an overview. So I think we should make copies of this available to people. I did some further editing. Yeah. Now, we're going to see and hear what were the 6 questions and the 6 answers, because this is chapters 1 through 3, remember? Chapters 1 through 3, 6 questions. There's Sutta on this little elevated seat there, and then over there's the sages, the one with the white beard, that's the head of those sages, named Shaunaka Rishi, and they're asking questions of Sutta. 6 questions. Question number 1. What is the absolute and ultimate good, or Shreya, for the people in general? Shreya. Maybe you know some lady or girl whose name is Shreya. It's a common name. Yeah? Indian name. So Shreya means ultimate good. Prabhupada explained it this way. There's two terms, short term, long term. Preya, that's what little kids like to do. They like to play. They're not thinking, I'm going to grow up and I have to go to school. I just want to play. That's called preya, short-term benefit. Shreya is long-term benefit. And Shreya Uttama is ultimate benefit. Absolute and ultimate good. What's the absolute and ultimate good for people in general? It's a good question, isn't it? Good question. And the answer given, to develop love of God through bhakti. And there's where the answer is found. These are important. These six it's the foundation for the whole Bhagavatam. It's expanded in later cantos. Then, question number 2. What's the essence or sara of all the scriptures? That's another good question. They say that the Vedas are vast and people hardly have time to read everything. So could you make it really simple? Tell us what's the essence of the whole thing? Good question. And the answer is devotional service to Lord Krishna, with some images showing different forms of devotional service, deity worship and offering prayers and chanting and so forth. Worshipping the lotus feet down at the very bottom over there. Cleansing the temple. Devotional service to Lord Krishna. That's the essence of all the scriptures. So what's the next question? For what purpose does the Supreme Personality of Godhead appear in the womb of Devaki as the son of Vasudeva? And so why does Krishna come to this world? Answer, to reclaim people in the mode of pure goodness. That's the answer in the Bhagavatam. And it's these are two references, chapter 2 and chapter 3. To reclaim people in the mode of pure goodness. That's a nice painting. That's Krishna and Balaram. Down below, there's Devaki and Vasudeva. And over to the side, I don't know who that is. Somebody else that's just honoring Krishna and Balaram. Then, number 4, it's not exactly a question, but it's, please tell us of the acts of the Lord in relationship to creating the material world. So he wants to know about Srishti, creation, what the Lord does for a process of creation. And it's some degree, it's in Canto 1, Chapter 2, and then it's Canto 1, Chapter 3, and then a big part of Canto 2 and Canto 3. It's a big topic. It's one of the 10 topics of the Bhagavatam, but it's presented in the question form in Chapter 1. Okay, the process of creation. Then number 5, they want to hear about the various incarnations. What forms does Krishna appear in this world that he's created? So it's in the beginning part of chapter 3, and then further cantos give lots more detail. There's like a list, 27, 28, kind of summary of some of the main incarnations in chapter 3 of Canto 1. And last, question number 6. This is another good question. After Krishna's departure, where have religious principles taken shelter? You want to guess? Srimad Bhagavatam. The Bhagavatam is a manifestation of Krishna, and the religious principles are protected and upheld by that sound vibration of Srimad Bhagavatam. Those who engage in hearing and reciting and remembering Srimad Bhagavatam are protected by religious principles. Their lives become influenced or covered or coated with religious principle, and their lives are protected by protecting Dharma when it's protected by Dharma. It's a nice teaching Prabhupada gave us. Dharma rakshata rakshataha. Dharma rakshata rakshataha. Raksha means protection. One who protects Dharma is protected by Dharma. So one who reads Srimad Bhagavatam is being protected by Dharma. It's dharmic, and when protected by Dharma, just by reading Srimad Bhagavatam, it happens. It goes inside, and it's the way that one sees the world and lives one's life. So I'm sure that not only Prabhupada, but all of our acharyas would be very, 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 that's 4 varies, pleased to see the devotees regularly getting together and reading Srimad Bhagavatam and discussing it for this reason. The principles of Dharma are within the pages of the Bhagavatam. Krishna comes, the form of Krishna will be seen in the pages of the Bhagavatam. Of course, it takes a qualitative hearing. Prabhupada writes it, rapt attention or ardent hearing, uses those phrases. But Krishna's there, and one can see, experience, feel his protection, his presence and his protection. So, this is the beginning part of our little festival, the Bhagavatam Reading Group Festival. If I'm not mistaken, we're supposed to give certificates to people who are participating. And whether you get a certificate or not, participate. Because it's very beneficial. Okay, so let's see if there's some discussion. Somebody asked me during this past weekend, what's your favorite literature? Right away I said Bhagavatam. You know, there are others that are also wonderful, certainly Bhagavad Gita and other things. But, you know, in one sense it's because my spiritual life began through association with Srila Prabhupada. I mean, as a child, I had some other teachings and so forth, but it really didn't carry me as this has carried me. And Bhagavad Gita is wonderful, but when I came in contact with Srimad Bhagavatam, I was a lost cause. It just, my experiences, it has changed my life. It's changed how I experience life. Let's say that. The world around is still the world around, but the experience of the world is different from Srimad Bhagavatam. I'm very indebted to Prabhupada and the book itself. So I'm very happy to be part of a festival that's celebrating reading Srimad Bhagavatam. So let's see if there's some discussion.
Sure, it's a question that's being asked over and over again, but you know, for grihasthas, any tip for keeping the faith alive, because it keeps fluctuating a lot.
So how-to is a question? It's a how-to question?
Yeah.
Well, a very simple answer, then I'll expand. A very simple answer is sadhu sangha. And so sadhu sangha means when you're associating with sadhus, you do what sadhus do. So what do sadhus do? Bhajana kriya. That's what sadhus do. So you engage with them in sadhu-like activity, hearing and chanting and remembering and praying and worshiping, and you get near a sadhu, and that's what they do. There's a description in Bhagavad Gita, Sangat Sanjayate Kama. So Sanjaya, O Sanjaya, Sangat Kama. You develop desire, kama, like those with whom you associate. So as a grahastha, you have to do so many things. I'm not a grahastha, but I do one thing. That's associated with grahasthas. It's like a simple answer. Another way is, if you want to get warm, you stand near a fire and you get warm. If you want to be, responsible in your grahastha duties, but sometimes it's hard to sustain enthusiasm and absorption because of the contact with the material energy in so many ways. So what to do to maintain that steadiness is, when you have sadhu sangha, when you have bhajana kriya that comes from sadhu sangha, or in the company of sadhus or devotees. Sadhu doesn't just mean somebody with a long beard or something. It means a devotee, someone whose heart is directed towards the Supreme Lord. So, with that association, over time, cultivating those activities with sadhus over time, the consciousness of attraction for Krishna becomes awakened. Now, I'm just expanding on sadhu sangha, which is the how-to. But what Lord Chaitanya teaches is that Krishna prema in its seed stage is within. Feelings, loving feelings, prema, in a dormant stage is already there. But it's like a seed, has life. But it can just sit in a jar or a bag or hundreds and hundreds of years. But then you can sprout it and the life comes out. It's just stored. Same. There's a loving attraction for Krishna already there. Proof. I'm proof. I never heard Krishna's name up until a certain stage of my life. But then some attraction. And where did that come from? And it's not just, somebody from America, a kid from America. All over the world. How did that happen? I mean, I'm expanding on sadhu sangha. One of the reasons I like to visit China is they don't know nothing about nothing. And when they hear about Krishna, they're attracted. In fact, many times I've been in completely new audiences that have never even heard the mantra before, and just by chanting the mantra, they experience something. They start to tears, their body is trembling, and they say, "What's going on? I never had that feeling before. What was that?" Many, I would say at least 30 times, completely new audiences. So what does that say? Krishna prema is there. It's just being awakened by sound. It's not the musicality. It's the sound of Krishna's name. So, back to your question. Do the activities with faith, with sadhus. And that which is there in a dormant stage starts to awaken. And as it awakens and matures, it's alive. And you continue to do your duties, but there's something else going on inside. and you're aware that that's something else is going on inside. And just so don't cut yourself off from sadhu sangha. You go away from the fire, you get cold. Stay warm. Yeah. Okay, we'll go on. There's some online questions. We'll come back to you folks that didn't say anything yet.
I don't know the name of the devotee.
It's okay.
What about the Bhagavatam that attracts you, Maharaj? I love the chapters myself. What about the Bhagavatam attracts you?
What about the Bhagavatam? What?
Attracts you personally?
It's not specifically this story or that chapter or this canto or something. I like what the Bhagavatam does. I like my heart I like what I feel about. So it's a transformation. I'm not going to point to, I mean, I have certain stories I like, but that's not what I meant to say. I like the relationship, my relationship with Krishna has become awakened and real and palpable from immersion in the Bhagavatam. To whatever degree there's attraction for Krishna and even, some beginnings of love for Krishna awakening, it's the association with Bhagavatam, and that's what I like.
Atmaram Prabhu is asking, is there going to be a flow session for each canto?
Stay tuned. It's going to be a surprise. We're going to go through cantos 1 through 6. We're not going to do all 18. Now, if you want to do, starting with 7, you go right ahead and prepare it. How's that?
This question is from Govinda Mohini Mataji. I did not know that Srimad Bhagavatam was spoken all these various times. That was very interesting to hear.
Yeah, isn't it?
Can you please explain how Parikshit Maharaj spoke Srimad Bhagavatam to Mother Uttara?
It doesn't give any detail. It just says that he said it. She inquired, he explained it.
This question is from Sundarananda Prabhu. The purpose of Lord Krishna's appearance is described as to reclaim those in the mode of pure goodness. How do we understand this given that we also know Lord Krishna came to attract all of us,
Yes,
even
he
those...
did. Yes, he did. It doesn't mean because he's delivering people in pure goodness, he's neglecting everybody else. It doesn't, it's not saying everything, it's saying one thing, not everything. So that's how you understand that, why is everybody else being left out?
Hare Krishna Maharaj. My question is the same thing as Govinda Mohini Mataji was asking. Different personalities spoke Bhagavatam to different devotees.
Yes.
Even from Bhagavatam itself, we understand Maitreya Muni speaking to Vidura.
Yes.
And you will be explaining. Of course, I'm just jumping. Maybe the creation part is going to be slightly different from what we hear in this second and third cantos. I was thinking when these personalities explained, heard Bhagavatam, is it going to be exactly similar content, or is it going to be glorification?
Say it slower. It's not going to be what?
Similar content, or is it going to be glorification of the Supreme Lord is called
there are details that are different but not contradictory. Just like, the Sankarshan, we know our disciplic succession, we're very familiar with. Krishna spoke to Brahma, Brahma spoke to Narada, Narada spoke to Vyas, etc. There's another we're not so familiar with, but it's right there in the Bhagavatam. Lord Sankarshan spoke to the Kumaras. And that, the Kumaras then spoke to Parashar Muni. And so, there's another disciplic succession. It's the same message. It's not in contradiction, but there's details that are emphasized in the Kumara Sampradaya that are not the same emphasized in Brahma Sampradaya, and vice versa. So it's not a different creation story, it's just different details and emphasis points. Okay?
This is from Amara Mataji. The sages of Naimisharanya are very inquisitive and are very much inspired to do good to the people of Kali Yuga,
Yeah.
who are suffering from so many miseries due to their own nature. How their hearing Srimad Bhagavatam is benefiting today, because ultimately it is the free will choice of an individual to understand the misery of this yuga and want to get out of it.
Well, it's not exactly a free will choice. It's sadhu sangha. Everyone is suffering, but how many people understand that they are suffering and why they are suffering and what the remedy is? It's not just a free will choice. Don't reduce it to that. Yes, when many people hear and don't pay attention, or it goes in one ear and out the other, they dislike it, or they trash it or something. So there has to be something, a qualitative effort on our parts to hear properly. So there is a free will choice involved, but don't reduce it to just free will. I'm not saying that that was your intention, but in short, we certainly make free will choices and make efforts. There's also a whole lot of mercy going on. Otherwise, it won't be fulfilled. Okay?
And this question is from Radha Kunjabihari Prabhu. My understanding till now was that one has to transcend the three modes to go back to Godhead. In the presentation, you mentioned that Krishna descended to deliver those in mode of goodness.
It's a similar question. Keep going. So what about the rest of us? Is that no?
No, I think this was about not pure mode of goodness. It's within modes of nature. That's what I think.
Is there more to his question? Okay.
No.
Okay, well, we also heard, the answer that I gave is one sentence or one statement doesn't exclude others. Pause. For example, something that we saw at the very beginning, I can go back to the slide, but it's good for the non-devotees also. Here we go. We'll go back to it. But even the non-devotees hovering under the spell of material energy can be delivered from such clutches if they hear the narration of Srimad Bhagavatam with devotion and attention from the right source. So, supposing you're not in the pure mode of goodness, is it beneficial for you? I hope so. Because otherwise you'd have a really small audience.
This is a comment from Krishna Keshava Prabhu. Okay. Yeah, the Krishna Keshava Das from Chris Camp, Chicago. There's a comment. Soon I will ask Arjuna Acharya or Govinda Das to introduce me to you if I'm very lucky.
Okay.
Personal thing, yeah.
Okay, last chance in the room here. Anything? Comment? Appreciation? Doubt? Enthusiasm? Anything? Nothing. Okay, you can pass. It's okay. The three shy ones in the front row here. Okay, see the Prabhupada ki? Sai.